Hello friends, welcome to the session. In this session, we shall discuss one of the best techniques in teacher training program, and that is concept of micro teaching, its characteristics. Also we shall discuss the objectives of micro teaching cycle, and comparison of traditional teaching and macro teaching. Let us discuss the concept of micro teaching. The term micro teaching was first invented by Allen of Stanford University, America in 1963, when an experimental project on the identification of teacher skill was in progress. Micro teaching is a teacher training technique for acquiring teaching skills. It is also one of the most recent innovations in teacher education program, which aim to modify teachers' behavior according to the specific objectives. As we have seen in the earlier session, each teaching skill is a set of related teaching behavior which tends to facilitate students' learning. Therefore, a teacher should be trained in all teaching skills for developing the ability of effective teaching. But the training of teachers in specific skills is a major challenge in the present educational program. The specific teaching skill can be developed by micro teaching experiences. Micro teaching allows practicing any skill independently and interacting it with other skills in a familiar environment. On the basis of research, it is observed that if a teacher is trained to acquire the sub skills of teaching one by one, and then if all of these sub skills are integrated together, then teacher become efficient. Thus, systematic training for each sub skill of teaching, we can say it is micro teaching. Micro teaching is a laboratory technique of teacher training in which the complexity of normal classroom teaching are simplified. Now we shall discuss the definitions of micro teaching given by the educationalist. Allen defined micro teaching is a scaled down teaching encounter in class size and time. According to him, a teacher teaches a small unit to a small group of 5 to 10 students for a small period of 5 to 10 minutes. Whereas, according to Passy, micro teaching is a teacher training technique which requires student teachers to teach a single concept using specified teaching skills to a small number of students in a short duration of time. And according to the Cliff, micro teaching is a teacher training procedure which reduces the teaching situation to simple and more controlled encounter achieved by limiting the practice teaching to a specific skill and reducing teaching time and class size. From this definition, we can say that micro teaching is a teaching training technique where the complexities of the normal classroom teaching are reduced by number one, practicing one teaching skill at a time, limiting the content of a single concept, reducing the class size to 5 to 10 and reducing the duration of the period to 5 to 10 minutes. On the basis of above mentioned definitions of micro teaching, we can point out the characteristic of micro teaching as number one, in micro teaching, feedback is provided immediately after completion of the period. Second characteristic is, it is a teacher training technique, not a method of classroom instruction. In micro teaching, teacher trainee practice a specific teaching skill at a time till attainment of mastery over the skill. Next one characteristic of micro teaching is, micro teaching is an analytical approach to training. It is highly individualized training device. Next characteristic is, micro teaching is a cyclic process and it is skill training techniques. These are the main characteristics of micro teaching. Now we shall move to the objectives of micro teaching. The main objectives of micro teaching are: number 1, to enable teacher trainees to learn and assimilate new teaching skills under controlled conditions. Number 2, to enable teacher trainees to master a number of teaching skills. Number 3, to facilitate teacher trainees to gain confidence in teaching. And number 4, to improve the skill of experienced teacher. These are the main objectives of micro teaching. Now we shall discuss micro teaching cycle. In micro teaching cycle, teacher trainee practices a specific teaching skill at a time, all attainment of mastering over the skill. Therefore, we can say that micro teaching is a cyclic process of 6 steps. The 6 steps generally involved in micro teaching are: number 1, plan, teach, feedback, replan, reteach and refeedback. We shall discuss these steps in detail. The first step of micro teaching cycle is plan. According to Benjamin Franklin, if you do not have a plan, then you are planning to fail. Planning is the first step of micro teaching cycle. In order to reduce the complexity involved in teaching, the teacher trainee is asked to plan a micro lesson, that is a short lesson for 5 to 10 minutes, which he will teach in front of micro class, that is group consists of 5 to 10 students. The plan of micro teaching involves the selection of topic and related content. Also, the related classroom activities are also planned in such a logical sequence where maximum applications of component of skill is possible. Now, the second step is teach, that is teaching. In this step, the teacher trainee is asked to teach a short topic to the students concentrating one of the teaching skill enumerated earlier. Now, the third step is feedback. This term refers to giving information to the teacher trainee about his or her performance. The information includes the point of strength as well as weakness relating to his or her performance. This helps the teacher trainee to improve his or her performance in the desired direction. Video recording can be done if facility permit. Fourth step is replan. On the basis of feedback, the teacher trainee is asked to replan his or her lesson, keeping the comments in view. Now, the fifth step is reteach. This involves teaching to the same group of students if the topic is changed, or to a different groups of students if the topic is same. Now, the last step is refeedback. In this step, replan and retaught lesson is reevaluated so that the student teacher may get another opportunity of removing his or her errors. Now, from this above discussion, we can say that replanning, reteaching and refeedback help the teacher trainee to improve his or her teaching skill and confidence to perform better than the previous attempt. This is about micro teaching cycle. Now, to know more about the concept of micro teaching, we shall discuss the comparison of micro teaching and traditional teaching. Now, in traditional teaching is a complex process, whereas micro teaching is a simple process. Now, the second difference, traditional teaching is content oriented, whereas micro teaching is skill oriented. Now, the third difference is the number of students in the class is 40 or more than 40, whereas number of students in micro teaching class is 5 to 10. Now, the fourth difference is traditional teaching is conducted in uncontrolled situation, whereas micro teaching is conducted in full controlled situation. In traditional teaching, a teacher practices several skills in a class, whereas in micro teaching, a teacher practices a single skill in a class. Now, last difference is there is a immediate feedback is not available in case of traditional teaching, whereas the provision of immediate feedback in micro teaching that helps the teacher to know his drawback and improve upon them. From the above comparison of micro teaching and traditional teaching, we can say that micro teaching is a new idea in the field of teacher education. Though the micro teaching technique is predominantly made for the teacher trainings, but it can also be used for experienced teacher for improving and updating their teaching skills. In this session, we have discussed the concept of micro teaching, its characteristics, objectives of micro teaching cycle, and comparison of traditional teaching and micro teachings. Thank you very much.